So I see there are a couple of people who have joined our session, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Chelsea. I'm also known as Instrutora Sabia. I train a martial art called Capoeira, and today I'm going to talk with you about Capoeira. We're going to do a little bit of music. I'll go through a little bit of the history, and we'll do a bit of the movement as well. So I'll give a brief introduction of who I am. Like I said earlier, my name is Instrutora Sabia. I train at a martial arts school called Capoeira Mandinga, Detroit. I've been practicing Capoeira now for 13 years and teaching for 9 years. I've been enjoying this martial art because it touches on a lot of aspects that I find deeply personal to myself, including connection to my history, my personal history and my personal heritage, my ancestors. And it connects in a form that is both musical and physical, which encapsulates who I am. So without further ado, I'd like to get started. The first thing I want to do is talk about the history of Capoeira. So Capoeira is an Afro-Brazilian martial art. It was created by people who were kidnapped and stolen from various nations in Africa and brought over during the transatlantic slave trade to Brazil. Now, if you think about these people, they come from different nations, so they all have their different customs, their different languages, religions, traditions, and whatnot. And when they were forced to live their lives as slaves, they kind of became one people. In addition to the people from Africa who were stolen, there were the indigenous people of Brazil who were also forced to live their lives as slaves. And on these plantations, their cultures and languages and religious practices mashed together. And as part of that, this martial art, which has its origins in Africa, evolved into what we now know this day as Capoeira. The martial art encompasses a lot of music, which is very traditional in a lot of African nations, as well as the movement. And there's a lot of instruments that are a part of this martial art. So what I'd like to do is start out with one of the primary instruments that is used in this martial art. It's called a beating bow. So I'm going to go pick up my beating bow. So this instrument here, called a beating bow, actually a great instrument. Its origins are African. There are a lot of gorded instruments. This is a gourd here. There are a lot of gorded instruments that have their origins in Africa that have evolved as they've crossed the Atlantic Ocean and become parts of other people's cultures and practices. This particular instrument is made out of a tree branch here, a fruit called a gourd that is grown and it's hollowed out once it's dried to make a resonator. And in this case, this particular one is decorated, but they don't always have to be decorated. This little bit of wire right here is a tire wire. We call it a rame. This is a fairly, in the grand scheme of things, this is a fairly modern addition to the beating bow because at the time when the transatlantic slave trade was happening, automobiles weren't, they didn't exist yet. And then, eventually they did exist. So tire wire wasn't the very first thing that was used here, but it's since evolved to use tire wire. Additionally, there's this basket here that creates a rattle. It's called a kashishi. It's made from reed that has been grown and dried out. The bottom of it is actually the part of the gourd that's been cut out. They use that part to put the bottom on. And the sound that you hear are actually beans or small pebbles, depending on who made the basket, that are inside the rattle. This part is called a baqueta. It just means stick, and it's used to strike the wire to make the sound. And then the last part of the beating bow is this stone that we usually call a pedra or a dobrao. This is used to create various pitches and notes on the beating bow so that you can get actually a little bit more of a melodic sound. So I'm going to give a brief demonstration of what the berimbau sounds like. So that instrument is used predominantly in capoeira as the primary instrument to dictate the way that people are supposed to move, how fast or how slow, and maybe what style that they use to play. So it's a very traditional instrument. It's a very quiet instrument, but it's considered in capoeira the master instrument because it leads and guides people and provides insight and messaging to the people who are practicing capoeira. So capoeira as a martial art was meant to be practiced in secret. The people who were practicing this martial art were slaves, unfortunately. So they weren't allowed to practice their martial art in the open where their oppressive slave owners could know about it. So the berimbau was used also as a way to disguise messages by the patterns and rhythm that you would hear to let the people who were practicing in secret know whether or not they were going to be in danger of being caught. So it's a very significant instrument. The next instrument I would like to show you is an instrument called a pandeiro. Now, pandeiro looks a little bit like a tambourine, and it's, a lot of people will just say that's just a tambourine, but there's some subtle differences. So I'm going to go get the pandeiro, and I will show you what that looks like. So this instrument here is a pandeiro, okay? Just like I said before, it's very much similar to a tambourine. There's some subtle differences. One of the main differences is that the number of jingles on a pandeiro are significantly smaller than on a tambourine. It's not meant to have very much of a jingle sound like a pandeiro would. The other thing is that some tambourines have a drum head, but all pandeiros definitely have a drum head. The idea behind this is that pandeiros were meant to be a percussive sound and meant to be a cheap way to make a drum. The people who were practicing this martial art, who needed to make their instruments, they didn't have a lot of resources, so they had to be resourceful. So if they wanted a drum sound, they had to get something that was simple to make, that didn't cost a lot of money and didn't need a lot of parts. So the pandeiro is meant to be a hand drum. So I'm going to give a quick demonstration of what that sounds like. So this instrument complements the berimbau. So when the berimbau is playing and the pandeiro is playing, it creates a nice little rhythmic pattern that can be very musical. So for the next part, I'm actually going to introduce one of my dear friends who trains capoeira as well, whose name is Bujiganga, and he's going to assist me by playing one of the instruments while I play the other, so you can get a sense of what this combined would sound like. So as capoeira evolved and as cultures continue to kind of emerge with this martial art, Another instrument was introduced called an atabaki. Now, an atabaki is actually the actual hand drum. This also has its origins in Africa. But what I'm going to demonstrate for you today is an atabaki that's not quite that. I'm going to use a conga. So an atabaki is a very big drum and it's very specially crafted. So it's very expensive to get out of Brazil and in the United States. It takes a lot of effort. So for people who have moved to the United States and moved across the world and want to continue to practice capoeira, they have replaced the atabaki for convenience and ease with the conga. So I'm going to play a conga rhythm for you that is typically used in our capoeira bateria, our music or our band. I'll demonstrate that to you now. All right. So thank you for your patience with that. The significance of introducing all of the music is to tie all the history together of capoeira and letting you know that the music is a form of transporting messages, signals, and most importantly, preserving the stories of the people who practiced this art long ago that we've now inherited. So it's extraordinarily significant to learn all the instruments and capoeiristas as they grow in capoeira. If you've never played an instrument before, you're taught how to play all of the instruments and to sing a few of the songs that we have in capoeira. For this next part, I'd like to go ahead and move into some music or into some movement. So what I'm going to do now is I have a little bit of music playing in the background. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit, but hopefully not so loud that you can't hear me. And we're going to prepare ourselves for actual movement. What I'm going to demonstrate is a few fundamental techniques in capoeira. So anything that any beginner who's never done anything capoeira or anything physical or anything like that at all should be able to do. You're going to learn our basic footwork, which is called the ginga. You're going to learn two attacks, two different kicks. One is called meia lua de frente. The other is called quixada. And then you're going to learn two escapes. And with these techniques, when two people play capoeira, they can combine these attacks and these escapes to create what we call a dialogue and a game. Okay? So capoeira was once used to maim and to kill. At some point, when the emancipation happened in Brazil and the people who had been enslaved were freed, they were still second-class citizens and they were unable to get jobs in the regular mainstream society. So they used their capoeira to become hitmen, to become bodyguards, to become assassins, but it's what they had. Okay, so at one point, capoeira was actually outlawed because of this. Now we had a significant figure come up in capoeira and petition the government to legalize capoeira again. And by doing so, there were some rules and things that had to be established to get capoeira considered a legal martial art to practice. For one, we had to establish a uniform. So if you notice, the uniform I'm wearing is a t-shirt, white pants, and a belt that symbolizes my rank in the martial art. Two, we had to create a structure. So we had to create a series of sequences, give our techniques some names, and come up with a way to teach those things. Okay. So what we're going to do now is demonstrate that for you. The last thing that you'll hear me say a lot as I talk about these techniques, you'll hear me say things like player, and you'll hear me say things like partner, and you'll hear me say things like game. So because capoeira was once outlawed, they were opponents that you fought, that you had to demolish, you had to end them. To help with the case of getting capoeira to be legalized again, people changed a lot of the naming conventions and the nomenclature around capoeira. So instead of fighting your opponent, we have a very friendly game with your friend or your partner. Now, that's not to say that capoeira is not effective. It's not to say that the fight of capoeira is gone. It absolutely is not gone. But to help with petitioning a government that honestly was quite racist at the time to legalize a martial art that was practiced by descendants of slaves as well as people who had just been emancipated. You had to be very careful in what you were presenting in order for it to be legalized. So with that, I will start my music and we'll start some movement. Okay, I hope everyone is in a good space, and I'm gonna adjust my camera a little bit because I'll be standing now. Let's see if this works. I'll point it down a little bit. Yeah, that should be good. We're gonna start with a little bit of footwork. This will be your warm-up. This shouldn't be too stressful. This will be your warm-up. So first, if you're standing up and you have space, try to stand up with your feet a little bit wider than shoulder width apart. Stand at whatever is your comfort level with this. Okay? The next thing you're going to do is you're going to take one leg and you're going to put it behind you. You're going to take that same leg and return it right back to where you got it. And then you're going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay? And we're going to repeat this motion over and over again until it's fluid. And while it's fluid, this motion is the start of a technique that we call ginga. Okay? Now, there's a little bit more to this. So ginga has a built-in defense, and that defense comes with our hands. Okay? So what we're going to do is stand one leg back, and you're going to put the arm up that's on the same side as that leg, up across your chest, bringing your hand at least to your shoulder, and at a slight angle and bend. Okay? And then you're going to step out, and then you're going to step back on the other side. And when you do that, you're going to switch your hands. Okay? And then you're going to repeat this motion over and over again until your body starts to sway. And as your body starts to sway, you are doing this basic step called ginga. So I can't necessarily see all of you, but I hope that you understand this motion here. This fundamental motion is where all of our movement in capoeira starts. Okay? So from here, what I'm going to do is show you your very first attack in capoeira. Okay? So we're going to stop with one leg back and our arm up in a defensive position. We're going to learn a kick called Meia Lua de Frente. It translates to half moon to the front or of the front, depending on your interpretation of the Portuguese. Okay? What we're going to do is take this leg, lift it up and out, and try to bring it across your body, and then bring it back down. Okay? And then we're going to take one step, which switches our side, and we call that one ginga. And we're going to try the exact same exercise on the other side. So you're going to take your back leg, and you're going to lift it up and out, and try to bring it across your body, and then back. Okay. So we're going to do two more at that tempo, nice and slow, go really easy. We'll switch our ginga, and we'll lift up, across the body, and back. And then one more on the other side. We'll lift up, across the body, and back. Okay. So now, let's try this technique in motion. So what we're going to do is we're going to do our ginga, and then we're going to count to 3. Okay? We're going to get a nice tempo going in our bodies. We're not going to go too fast. Go at your own pace. As I count, I'm going to hit the back of my foot. So I step back here, that's going to be one hit, that's going to be a second hit, that's going to be a third hit. So when we practice capoeira, we try to use our internal clock, our internal rhythm of ready, set, go. But instead of saying ready, set, go, we usually count in Portuguese. So we say dois, três, and then we do whatever it is our teacher has asked us to do at that point. Okay? So we'll try it again on the other side. So we'll switch. Dois, três, and kick. Back. Dois, três, kick, back. Couple more. Dois, três, kick, back. Dois, três, kick, and back. Okay, so that technique is called meia lua de frente. We have two ways of doing it. The way that I demonstrated is a very easy way to approach it because your back leg is doing all the work. For this next part, I'm just going to demonstrate the other way that we approach it, which is with an entrada. This part is not necessary for you to do unless you want to try it. You're more than welcome to. So when we do this kick with an entrada, entrada means entrance. It means you're entering into your technique. Doesn't matter what that technique may be, whether it's a kick or an escape or some type of transition movement. Okay? So I'm going to demonstrate quickly how we do this same kick with an entrada. Dois, três. Entrada, kick. Dois, três. Entrada, kick. One on the other side. Dois, três. Entrada, kick. Dois, três. Entrada, kick. Okay, so I'm going to take a second to come up close and explain a little bit of what I'm doing. So you may not be able to see my face, but hopefully you can see my shoulders down to my legs. If you notice, I'm keeping my hands involved in everything that I'm doing, okay? And the reason for that is my hands serve a number of purposes. One, they help me stabilize my movement. My legs are pretty heavy, and when I swing my legs with momentum, it can throw my balance off. So I use my arms and swinging them in the opposite direction to help stabilize that momentum that's flying in one direction. The other use of my hands is to help me keep my defense up. So normally, we're not practicing capoeira by ourselves in our living rooms. We're usually practicing capoeira up close and personal with a partner, okay? And when I'm practicing with my partner, I want to make sure that my partner doesn't take advantage of my vulnerabilities, so I keep my defense up. Now, my defense in my hands is not very rigid. I'm not meant to absorb a blow, okay? So I'm not trying to block anything. It's a very relaxed defense. It's meant to parry or essentially be like feelers in space and let me know that, hey, while you were doing the thing that you were doing, somebody got really close to your space and your arms were there to protect you. One of the other uses of our arms in this is, in some cases, depending on where you train capoeira, you like to create an illusion. Like you like to create some misdirection. If your partner is watching you, as they should be when they play capoeira, and they're trying to determine which way you're going to move so they can maybe counter-strike, or maybe they can just complement your movement, you may want to throw them off a little bit. And one of the ways you can throw them off is by using your hands to create some type of illusion or, sleight of hand, or just get their eyes to go in a different direction so that you can probably do something else that you'd like to do, okay? So keep your hands involved when you do these techniques that I show you. Try to Keep your arms up and moving as best as you can. The next technique I'm going to show you is a kick called quixada. Okay? Quixada looks like a high arcing rainbow kick. Okay? It's the opposite motion of the meia lua de frente. Okay? So the meia lua de frente, we lifted our leg up and we came in front of our bodies and we crossed over. The quixada is going to go the opposite direction, which means it's going to come around and away from our body. So I'll give you a demonstration of that. Let's go back to our Jenga. Remember that we want to step back and keep our arms up. I'm going to use our ready, set, go pacing to demonstrate this next kick. 1, 2, 3. So from our Jenga position, I'm going to take my back leg, and I'm going to lift it forward towards the camera, and I'm going to rotate it out and back to where I got it. We'll do one Jenga, and then we'll switch the kick. So the same thing, back leg, you're going to bring it forward towards the camera and all the way behind you. So we'll do 2 more at that pace. We'll do one Jenga to switch our sides. We'll go forward and round back. One Jenga. Round and back. So let's play with this kick. One thing I didn't do is switch my hands in this. When we get into our rhythm, you'll see how my hands switch when I do this kick. It can be a little bit confusing, so if your hands get kind of all over the place, don't worry about it too much. Let's start with our Jenga. Now we're going to do our ready, set, go by counting to 3 in Portuguese. 1, 2, 3, kick, back. 1, 2, 3, kick, back. 2 more. 1, 2, 3, kick, back. 1, 2, 3, kick, back. All right. Now that you have a sense of what this kick is, we'll do it a touch faster, a little bit more in rhythm. Okay? So let's try this a little bit up tempo. Going just a little bit faster in our Jenga. Make sure you feel your body doing a nice sway. Keep your hands up as best that you can. Just feel the rhythm and relax and sink into your Jenga. 1, 2, 3, kick, back. 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 We'll do 2 more. 1, 2, 3, kick, back. Last one. 1, 2, 3, kick, back. All right. So now I've shown you 2 attacks that are fundamental movements in capoeira. But more importantly than being able to attack in this martial art is being able to escape. You want to be able to get out of the way. If your attack doesn't work, I guarantee you your partner's attack might. So you definitely want to know how to dodge your partner's attack. There are a number of different escapes in capoeira, and they're all named a bunch of different things. And depending on who you train capoeira with, the same escape can be called 4 or 5 different names based on their history and their lineage. I'm going to show you 2 very basic escapes. The first escape that I'm going to show you involves squatting. So make sure that you are comfortable in a squat. If you're not, it's okay to sit this last one out, okay? This escape is called, in Portuguese, it's called cucarinha. It's a very long name for a very short movement, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and demonstrate that escape. So we're gonna start in our Jenga position. We're gonna take our back leg and bring it forward. At the same time, we're gonna take our guard arm, bring it over our head, and go straight down into a squat. And you come back up, bring your guard arm back to its defensive position, and that leg back. Now let's switch sides. The same thing on the other side. We're gonna take this leg and bring it in line with our front leg. We're gonna take our guard arm and bring it over our head, and we're gonna drop down into a squat. Okay, so let's do a couple of these out of Jenga. Squats can really be great for your legs, but they also are very exhausting and they can be strenuous on your knees, so I won't overwork this one too much. Let's go into our Jenga position and start moving. And we'll use our ready, set, go in the form of counting to 3 in Portuguese. 1, 2, 3, down, and back up. 1, 2, 3, down, and back up. We'll do 2 more. 1, 2, 3, down, back up. 1, 2, 3, down, and back up. Okay. Normally, if you train with me in my classes, we'd probably do that particular drill several more times. But a few times isn't good enough for now. This particular escape is the simplest escape that you can do to just get out of the way. You're essentially using your arm to protect your head, okay? You notice that this part of my arm and this part of my arm create a little bit of a barrier. Again, I'm not trying to brace. I don't want to absorb a blow. If my arm is stiff and up against my head and someone gets me here, I'm still going to get knocked in the head. So that's not the idea. The idea is to defend myself as it grazes over, okay? Keep in mind that Capoeira is a martial art that is constantly moving. So there isn't a lot of time to just stop and absorb a blow. So a lot of how we defend ourselves is to help us get underneath an attack while transitioning into the next movement. That being said, let's go into our second escape, okay? Our second escape is called esquiva baixa. And the most simplest way to translate that is esquiva means escape, and baixa means low or to the ground, depending on your translation and in the context. So we're going to do a low to the ground escape. It's very simple, okay? So let's go back to our Jenga position. Now, most of our work for this escape is already done because we're already here in this position, okay? What we're going to do is lower our base to the ground. We'll use our free hand to stabilize ourselves on the ground. We'll take our back leg and extend it behind us. We'll take our front leg and keep it bent. And the arm that we're using for guard will come above our head as we go down. So what it looks like is so. Okay. I'll switch sides so that you can see it on the other side. So I'm going to use this is now my guard hand. This leg is going to extend back behind me. This leg is going to stay bent. And and my opposite hand is going to stabilize me on the ground. Okay? So let's try getting into that escape from our jingle. So we'll go back into our position and we'll count 1, 2, 3. And on 3, just extend your back leg, stabilize yourself, and put one hand up above your head. And then come back. Same thing on the other side. 1, 2, 3. Put down. Up. 1, 2, 3. Um, 2, 3. Down. And up. All right. I think that one is not as bad on the knees. So we can probably do that one a little bit up tempo. So we'll do about 4 or 5, maybe 6. Let's do 6. We'll go right in rhythm without stopping. Do the best you can, or if you need to, go ahead and sit this one out as well. It's okay. So let's go into our Jenga position. We'll start our Jenga. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Okay. So those are 2 basic attacks, 2 basic escapes that you can use in Capoeira. I'll take a minute and I will review all the attacks and all the escapes that I just showed you with their names so that you can see them all again. And then I'd like to leave a little bit of time for opportunity for questions or if you want any more demonstration of Capoeira movement. First attack, meia lua de frente. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Second attack, quixada. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. First escape, cucarinha. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And second escape, esquiva baixa. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So, are there any questions about what you've just seen, or would you like to see any additional demonstration?
Hi, thank you for that. There was one question that came up earlier. I believe it was about the berimbau. Baba Baxter asked, is it considered a string instrument?
That is an excellent question. And the answer to that is a little bit blurred, okay? So the berimbau, without getting too grotesque, was once this particular part of the berimbau was once used, was made with animal parts, and then evolved to use tire wire. It's can fall under either category of a percussive instrument or a string instrument, almost like a piano. So if you think about a piano, when you strike one of the keys, there's a hammer that's striking a wire in there, okay? But there's also the wire that's a part of it. And if you think about most traditional string instruments that are in our modern times, we tend to think of things like violins and violas and cellos and things like that, where there's an instrument that is creating a vibration by creating friction, by rubbing the arame. The reason why this one can blur the lines is because when you strike the arame, you are still creating a vibration that creates a sound that comes out of the resonator, but you're not creating the vibration by way of creating friction like so. You're creating the vibration by striking the wire. So it's a very good question, and it can kind of fall in either category.
Thank you. And can you say a little bit more about the tire wire, why it's used, how that became to be a thing?
Absolutely. So the tire wire, I don't know if anyone has ever actually worked with a tire before, and I don't mean just, changing a flat. I mean like really having to work with a tire. But there in the sidewall is about 30 feet of very thin wire. In the advent of cars, unfortunately, we also created this debris of flat tires and rubber parts everywhere. It was easier and the wire lasted longer than the parts of it that came from animals with the force of striking the wire. So the way that that's actually made is typically we get a small tire, maybe no bigger than a 14 inch rims, or maybe 16. My measurement's not right, but if you go and look at your tire on the outside, it'll tell you what the sidewall is, and there'll be a number, 13, 14, something like that. It's that size that we go for. Actually, the bigger the tire, the thicker the gauge of the wire. So we want to have a gauge of the wire that's not super thin because it'll snap really quickly. And they're not meant to last forever. That's why they're handy with using tires, because tires are easily accessible. But you don't want something too thick because then it's harder to get the vibration. So you want something that's a nice, decent gauge, not too thin, not too thick, and something that you can bend and create tension in. If you notice, there's a lot of tension in this instrument. This instrument has a bend in it that creates the tension that makes the sound. So you want something that is flexible enough to be able to be tensed without snapping. Okay, and tire wire actually does that really well. People have experimented with piano wire, they've experimented with guitar string, and it just doesn't work the same way. Usually the gauges are a little bit too thick, or it's just a little bit of a different type of wire texture. So that's why we go with tire wire. It's a very good question.
Yeah. We're almost at our time. If folks, maybe we have time for just one more question. In just a moment, we're going to move back to our main stage. But thank you so much, Sabia, for the history and the movement. I'll just give folks a second if they want to pop anything down in the chat box. But if not, we'll move on to the stage, vibe out for a little bit before we get ready for our next sessions. Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much. See you